Part 4. Lightstorm. Acton, California. Now, 3:14 a.m. Dana Short had been fantasizing about his wife's younger sister. This was an extremely dangerous thing to do, not only because of where thoughts like that might lead, but because he was doing it while driving a big Kenworth semi-tractor trailer on a treacherous downgrade in suddenly thickening fog. He was teasing himself with what he imagined Denise's breasts looked like when the red glare of a car's rear lights abruptly appeared out of the gathering mist. He slammed his foot against the brake pedal. The hydraulics squealed and hissed, locking up. The cab rapidly bounced along the road, the tires ripped off the asphalt by the unwieldy momentum made by 38 tons of frozen squash in the refrigerated trailers. He ground metal, downshifting the lumbering truck, wincing as the load shifted his way. In the explosion of adrenaline rush, he saw a clear vision of his truck jackknifing around like an angry scorpion, whipping the cab with tremendous force through the side rail and down the embankment of the 14 freeway, to be dashed on the Vasquez rocks below. But tonight, he was lucky. The tires hit a dry spot and grabbed once and for all. The truck shuddered and swerved, but held the road, backing off from the slow-moving car at the last moment. Dana gripped the wheel, his breath coming in ragged jags. He decided that this had been a warning from God. Stop thinking about adultery with your wife's 18-year-old sister or... He sighed as he blearily spotted the Sierra Highway exit sign looming out of the fog like a welcome beacon. His foot gently touched the brake a few times, getting the monster vehicle to settle. Then he drove down the ramp and into the parking lot of the Corral. There were few spaces left in the all-night truck stop. The uncharacteristic summer fog had driven the nightly herd of truckers off the Antelope Freeway and into the worn, patched booths. Dana rolled his rig up alongside another like his, then hopped down, bone-weary and butt-sore. He slammed the door and sauntered across the lot towards the garishly lit bar restaurant, loosening his shirt, which was damp with perspiration. Jesus, he thought, as he glanced at the bank of fog rolling across the highway. You'd think this stuff would cool things down. But it only made it more difficult to breathe. The muggy air seemed to grow heavier as he reached the entrance. It was suffocating and strangely charged, as if it was going to rain. Indeed, as he opened the door, he thought he saw a flash of lightning reflected in the glass. He looked up at the sky. All he could see was the mist, front-lit green and orange by the neon sign above the door. He shrugged and went inside. If he had stayed a moment longer and looked back towards his truck instead of looking at the sky, he would have seen another flash of lightning, arcing between his rig and the one parked alongside. He might have thought it was St. Elmo's fire. He would have been wrong. The streetlights flickered and winked out. The fog began to flow back towards the trucks, forming a whirlpool of turbulence between them. Wild fingers of blue-white energy furiously danced in the steel canyon formed by the trailers, crackling like crumpled shrink wrap. A dust devil whirled up from the asphalt, sucking papers and cigarette butts into the churning air. A low hum rose to a howling peak, as if an invisible transistor radio was scanning static, searching for stations. Then it found one. Here. The strange lightning whirled into a roiling sphere of energy, shot through with racing currents. The side mirrors on both trucks bent outwards and then shattered. A flash like 1,000 Instamatic cameras going off. Then the static abruptly ended in a loud crack, like a muted cherry bomb. The light rapidly faded, and a cloud of vapor blew away, revealing something standing there where a moment before there had been nothing. It was a naked man. His massive body was covered with white ash that fell away like fine flour as he rose up and flexed his perfectly sculpted torso. His military short hair was smoking. His face was devoid of emotion. His eyes, cobalt blue, alive yet dead, taking in but not giving out. The arms were a study in powerful symmetry, the angry curve of the biceps narrowing with precision at the elbow, then expanding with mathematical balance into corded forearms that flowed into almost gracefully thin wrists. The Promethean man inhaled, swelling the prodigious chest, tentatively tasting the atmosphere. He noted the high moisture content with no curiosity. It was a bald fact that had no meaning until it was joined with a dozen others, all of which gave a rapid overview of place and time. Behind him, a curved slice had been cut out of the rear trailer of a truck, the edges touched by the ball of time displacement, still glowing from the charge. The arc continued to the asphalt, forming a circular crater under his feet. The man was standing in the middle of what had been an energy ball. He stepped from between the trucks to scan the parking lot, pausing to note 3 polished, chopped Harley-Davidson motorcycles near the neon-lit entrance, precariously leaning on chrome kickstands, their extended front forks like metal sculptures of dogs, stretching out their front paws. Muffled music from a jukebox thudded away. The man glanced through the windows. There were people inside, laughing and arguing and loudly ordering drinks and food. The man turned and strode towards the entrance. He knew he would find the owner of one of those cycles inside. Dana had just settled into a booth. The place looked like hell, but at least the food was okay. Next to him, 2 burly truckers were hunched over their chili fries, cat hats pushed back on their heads. 3 scruffy, jean-jacketed bikers played a game of pool in the back, their Miller empties lining the table's rail. The dive's owner, Lloyd, was a fat, aging bear in a soiled apron who stood grumpily behind the bar. On the far side of the room, an impromptu card game was going on amongst a gaggle of truckers, waiting out the fog. Dana glanced up as the waitress came over. He instantly scanned her features with interest. Too much makeup. Maybe 5'3" or 4", probably 20 pounds overweight. But she wore most of it up front, and well. Dana liked that. A lot. And she was chewing gum with that dazed, only half-conscious expression that indicated she probably watched a lot of TV sitcoms. Easy prey. His kind of woman. If he didn't already have a woman. Guilt welled up, and he tried to suppress his growing lust with thoughts of his wife. Carla was a religious woman who took her marriage vows very seriously, especially the part about being faithful. If she found out that he had committed adultery, it would kill her. But he'd been married to Carla for over 6 years. He knew every nook and cranny of her body, and worse, every gesture and word she uttered in bed. Making love to Carla had become like watching an I Love Lucy rerun for the 20th time. Comfortably boring. Lately, the thought of new terrain obsessed him at every turn. He hadn't been this horny since he was in high school. He was painfully aware that half the human race was female. Strange females, delightfully strange females. Like this waitress. Her nameplate read Claudia. He said hello as she handed him the soiled menu. She returned his smile with a saucy wink and trundled off to the kitchen. Dana rested his eyes on her behind as it rolled and undulated away, rocking her apron ties as if they were a cradle. He sighed, letting his mind play with that image. And running alongside the sensual flow of his private porno film was the border of his conscience, straining to dam up the Machiavellian plots he was furiously hatching to hide the hoped-for adultery from Carla. He was so engrossed with the fruits of his mental labours that he didn't notice the front door open and the big, naked guy stroll in. Everyone else did, however, as the man calmly strode across the room, his emotionless gaze passing over the customers with seemingly little interest. What the man saw was a 40,000-bit digitized display of the room, overlaid with an alphanumeric readout that changed faster than the human eye could follow. The faces of the gaping truckers, the wide-eyed owner, and the awestruck waitress were electronically fragmented, and each sector analysed to interpret their emotional state and anticipate possible hostile behaviour. No one was moving, except one of the bikers. Robert Pantelli ate bad times for breakfast and spat out trouble for lunch. Most things in life didn't surprise him. What he was looking at now did. He stopped puffing on his foul-smelling cigar and slowly lowered it, a dark smile spreading across his wet lips. The nude man saw a pulsing electronic outline forming around Robert's body. Thousands of estimated measurements rapidly flashed on and off in the man's internal visual scanner. The biker's clothing had been instantly analysed and referenced with contemporary motorcycle riding gear. To Robert, this had taken perhaps 2 seconds. He showed his filthy teeth. A few in the front were missing. His speech was slurred by alcohol. "This guy knows how to beat the heat." Nervous laughter from his 2 friends. The man showed no discernible reaction for a moment, then spoke in a bland, neutral tone that indicated no particular emotion. "I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle." Robert's eyes narrowed, then glanced at his buddies. They watched him expectantly. Robert decided to give them a show. He took a long draw on his stogie, getting the tip cherry red hot, then turned back to the stranger. "You forgot to say, please." More laughter from Robert's friends, louder and more relaxed this time. They sensed this guy wouldn't fight. Despite his imposing physique, he stupidly just stood there, a blank look on his pus. He must have been some kind of loony. Robert didn't like loonies. They reminded him of his asshole father, and besides, he wanted to get back to his game. So he lifted his cigar and ground it out on the stranger's chest. There was a soft sizzling, like bacon crackling on a griddle. Then a thick silence. It shook Dana out of his reverie, and he glanced over, registering the sight of the naked customer with a gasp. There was a smoking charred hole in the man's chest, and yet he was showing no sign of the slightest indication of pain. What happened next went so fast that Dana almost didn't think it really happened. Almost. The nude man calmly reached out and clutched Robert by his meaty upper arm in a powerful hydraulic grip. The biker felt the impossibly strong fingers crushing his flesh like steel pincers and screamed at the top of his lungs. One of Robert's friends hefted his pool cue by the narrow end as if it were a Louisville slugger. The heavy end whistled in a powerful swing and cracked in 2 across the back of the stranger's head. Incredibly, the nude man seemed not to notice. Didn't even blink. Without releasing his grip on Robert, the stranger snapped his arm straight back and grabbed pool cue by the front of his jacket, then abruptly launched the heavy-set biker through the nearest window. Glass erupted as he arced onto the pavement outside, hitting it like a rack of beef. Next, the stranger lifted all of Robert's 230 pounds clear over the bar, through the serving window, into the kitchen, where he landed on the big flat grill. Steam squealed up as the hot metal flash seared his skin. Robert howled, flopping and jerking until he rolled to the floor in a smoking heap. The third biker whipped out a knife with a 6-inch blade and slashed at the big man's face. But the stranger clutched the slashing metal with his bare hand and, gripping it by the razor-sharp edge, jerked it from the biker's hand. He flipped it in a rapid blur, then snatched it out of the air by the handle. Whirling like a fan blade, the stranger slammed the biker face down over the bar, then brought the knife whistling down, pinning the biker's shoulders to the bar top with his own steel. Dana had blinked 3 times, and it was over. Like the other customers, he was so stunned he simply sat there and watched as the naked man walked around the bar, pushed past Lloyd, and walked into the kitchen. It wasn't only that it happened so fast, or that the perpetrator was obviously a lot more vicious than the three obviously very vicious men. That was certainly enough to give everyone pause. But it was that the man's attitude had made everyone keep their seats. There was no reasonable motive, no acceptable explanation, no frame of reference for the cool violence of the nude stranger. Which meant he was surely crazy. And someone that vicious and that crazy just wasn't meant to be fucked with. The Mexican cook was thinking along the same lines as he stumbled away from the stranger, who walked towards Robert, busy cursing in pain on the floor. The biker looked up as the shadow fell across him. Growling like a wounded animal, he struggled to get out his military-issue Colt 45 auto pistol tucked under his charred leather jacket. But his deep-fried fingers couldn't pull the trigger. The stranger's arm lashed out, and he grabbed the gun, like a man swatting a fly. Terror flushed through Robert as he watched the man raise the weapon. But instead of pointing it at him, the naked man carefully examined the pistol. For an electronically stretched instant, the man analysed its caliber and its operating condition. The idea of aiming at the biker on the floor didn't occur to the man as an option. The target was temporarily disabled. Shooting him would have been an unnecessary use of force. All the man wanted was what he had initially demanded. He turned his emotionless eyes on Robert. The biker shuddered, all his brain cells taxed trying to decide what to do next. Further combat seemed out of the question. He didn't have the tools anymore. The crazy nudist had easily taken the gun. Robert had no choice now. He slowly reached into his pocket, wincing with the pain this caused his already swelling hand, and removed his motorcycle keys. He slid them across the floor to the loony's foot. Then, grunting from a shooting pain caused by a fractured rib, Robert started getting out of his jacket. Dana was edging towards the front door when the stranger came out of the kitchen, now wearing the biker's plain leather jacket, leather riding pants, and heavy cleated boots. He purposefully marched towards the crowd gathered around the moaning biker, still pinned to the pool table. They hastily parted like the Red Sea as he walked up. Without slowing his stride, he jerked the knife out. The wild-eyed, bleeding man slumped to the floor as the stranger continued towards the door. Nobody dared stand in his way. As he passed, Dana, trembling with fear, blurted, "Evening." The man turned, no, more like swiveled, his head. His lifeless eyes focused on Dana for a microsecond that seemed to last a lifetime. Then he faced the door and pushed through, letting it slam as he went outside. Dana shuddered and wiped his moist forehead with the back of his hand. Christ, that was close. He shakily went to the window. Everyone else silently joined Dana, watching in fearful silence as the stranger crossed the lot to the parked Harleys. Everyone but Lloyd, who glanced outside, then down at the wounded biker on the floor. A growing pool of blood was staining the carpet. Lloyd threw his apron down and ran behind the bar, reaching for something in a hidden cubbyhole. Outside, the stranger approached the 3 cycles. Slipping the 45 into his belt, he inserted the key in the first. It didn't fit. Without concern or hesitation, the man simply turned to the next. The key went in. He swung one leg over the massive Harley 1380cc Fat Boy with a customized saddle and cherry black paint job. Any normal, knowledgeable motorcycle man would have gladly paid good money for a cycle like this one. The stranger was knowledgeable in the extreme. In fact, he could recall, in an instant, a complete technical rundown on every component in the motorcycle. But he was not a normal man. He picked this kind of vehicle for its potential reliability, flexibility, and speed, all vital requirements for the mission he was about to undertake. He slipped the dagger into his boot and kicked once, powerfully. The engine instantly caught with a throaty rumble that vibrated the cycle's metal frame. The stranger glanced around, penetrating the rapidly thinning fog, then slammed the heavy iron into gear with a clunk. Before he could release the clutch handle, Lloyd appeared at the door with a sawed-off 10-gauge Winchester lever-action shotgun. He fired into the air, the blast echoing over the Harley's thunder, and jacked another round in fast, aiming at the stranger's back. "I can't let you take the man's bike, son. Now get off, or I'll blow you off." The man turned and considered Lloyd coolly. A second later, he eased the shifter up into neutral, rocked the cycle onto its kickstand, swung his leg over, and walked calmly towards the owner. Lloyd stood his ground, fury and fear warring for supremacy, as the man walked right up to him, staring straight into his shotgun's muzzle. Lloyd blinked sweat out of his eyes, trying to decide if he was going to kill a man in cold blood over a piece of machinery that wasn't even his. Of course, he couldn't let this guy get away with terrorizing his customers and stealing their property. This was his place, and he needed the loyalty of everyone who came through the door. If this nutcake got away with this, he'd lose business. On the other hand, the stranger's hand blurred out like a striking cobra, and suddenly he was holding the shotgun. One smooth, efficient motion, and the muzzle was now inches from Lloyd's face. Lloyd gaped, slack-jawed. He was just beginning to think about what it would feel like to have his head exploded at close range by a shotgun, when the man held the weapon rock steady in one hand and reached out with the other, fingers stretching. Oh, shit. But the stranger merely slipped a large pair of sunglasses out of Lloyd's shirt pocket, put them on, then abruptly turned and walked back to the Harley. He shoved the gauge across the handlebars, through the clutch and brake cables, and roared off in a shower of gravel. Lloyd slumped against the doorframe, so happy to still be alive. Dana watched the motorcycle disappear into the fog and considered how, twice in one night, he had come close to death. It had to be an omen. He swore to himself then and there that he would never again fantasize about adultery. Carla was only the first of many innocents whose life would be inadvertently and irrevocably changed by the coming of the second Terminator. The Terminator roared down the freeway, merging south into the 5 freeway, heading towards Los Angeles. The cold green-white overhead lights intermittently streaked across the chrome of the roaring cycle and flowed over the cyborg's wraparound sunglasses, like the tracks of tracer rounds.